Well, I am fresh off a trip to Boise State, where we'll talk about what I learned there, what's to learn at Boise State and beyond. I'm Jon Canzano. You can read my work at joncanzano.com. He's Jon Wilner. You can read his work at wilnerhotline.com. We have a lot to talk about today. I'll get to Boise, Wilner. I have a lot of things to say about Boise State.
I want to hear about Boise.
I'm fired up about this. I'm doing this tour of the New World Pac-12, getting to know some of these fans in these new places, but let's start with the big news of the week, if we can. Big powwow or big meeting between the SEC and the Big Ten. What was your immediate takeaway? Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti getting their brains together.
Well, they've had their brains together now for over a year, and they are, I think, moving pretty quickly into the new world order for college football. Right? The changes for next season are going to be a little more difficult to get approved because all the conferences have to vote. It's a unanimous. But for 2026 and beyond, the Big Ten and the SEC can really ram through whatever they want as long as ESPN's on board. And clearly they want to expand the playoff to at least 14, maybe 16. They want to get these automatic qualifiers, and we should talk about that. That has a ripple effect through the whole system of college football, but it's really, they're just flexing their muscles. This is the world that has been created. They created it. They had enablers, and now everybody else kind of has to deal with it.
I remember talking to one of the presidents who was on that board, that governing board for the CFP. Remember when the presidents all had to vote and what was going to happen for 25, and then the Big Ten and the SEC got the authority for 26. And I'm thinking back to the quote. It was something along the lines of, I hope they do the right thing. There was a little bบof trust that was given as some of the control for 26 and beyond was ceded to these two superpowers. And I guess the threat all along, Wilner, was the Big Ten and the SEC would just break off and do their own thing. Do you ever really think they were serious about that, or is that a leverage play? Because when I heard that, I was like, everything you need to know in life, you could learn by playing poker. Call their bluff on that. Put them in a situation where they alienate large swaths of the country. Come on, they wouldn't have done that at all. Do you think they were ever that serious about taking their ball and going home?
I think they were serious in the room when they were threatening, for sure. Whether they could have followed through, I tend to agree with you. I think their bluff should have been called. I don't think, in addition to, like you said, alienating massive amounts of the college football fan base, I've always questioned how that would have played in states that have SEC and non-SEC schools.
Ooh.
Like South Carolina, right? Okay, so South Carolina's going off in this new world order postseason, but Clemson gets left behind. Texas moves on. Texas Tech, Baylor, left behind. Kentucky moves on. Louisville, left behind. Florida moves on. Florida State. I never thought it would ultimately work politically because, all those governors and lieutenant governors and senators and Congress representatives, they got alma maters. And chances are some of those alma maters are going to be in danger of getting left behind. I just never thought it would work at that level. But apparently they made a pretty good convincing argument that they were going to take their ball and go home unless everybody else gave them the authority to run the show.
And I think it came up too in our interview with Mike Oresco, the former commissioner of the American long ago, where, there was question about, giving up the leverage. And, it's not just the group of five, it's the group of five plus the Big 12 and the ACC and the New World Pac-12. And, is there enough there for that group of schools to kind of come together and go, look, if the Big Ten and SEC try to run away with this, what is our move? What is our play? And I'm just not sure there was ever any congruency, with the others. We'll call them the others. There wasn't enough congruency in that room to get everybody on the same page. I don't like it. I don't like, I think conference champions should get in automatically. We can talk about whether or not seeding should be re-looked at. I think we both agree it should at least be looked at. But I don't like the idea that you're going to pencil in or maybe Sharpie in multiple teams as automatic qualifiers in your conference. We haven't seen you play a game. Imagine if we did that with the SEC prior to this season where they weren't very good. I get why they want 4 teams in. Of course they want 4 teams in. They want as much access as possible, as much money guaranteed as possible. But sports is about, merit, right? Sport. We award a championship based on merit. We award awards based on merit.
Yep.
We don't start the year by saying you're guaranteed to have this many teams in a playoff. You're guaranteed to be, you're guaranteed to be one of the top 3 Heisman finalists.
Right.
No, we let it play out on the field. And I don't know what the SEC and the Big Ten are afraid of, if it's based in fear, or maybe it's just based in greed and power and leverage.
Well, here's my theory. I think you have to revert. If you're going to look at it from their perspective, you got to reverse engineer the whole thing. So they want more money, right? Everybody in college athletics always wants more money. But there's no indication ESPN is going to give them more money if they expand the playoff to 14. So where do they get more money? Well, they get more money by creating an in-season scheduling alliance partnership, right? So you got Ohio State's playing Georgia on the 3rd week, and then you got LSU playing Penn State on the 4th week. However they figure it out, right? They've got this huge new package of high-quality games. Well, my guess is that Fox and ESPN would pay for that, right? That's elevating the in-season inventory. But what's the problem with that series?
You lose games.
You lose games.
Yeah.
And what has the selection committee done for 11 years? The first number they look at is not strength of schedule or strength of record or win. It's number of losses. And I think Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey are worried that if they do this scheduling deal to get more money, they're going to get punished by the committee because they're going to have more losses. Well, what's the way to essentially put the committee on the back burner for the selection process? Automatic bids. So the committee would still, I assume, handle the seeding, but the automatic bids would be up to the conferences to determine based on conference play. So if LSU lost to Penn State, the SEC and Big Ten would be getting the money, but there'd be no drawback to LSU in terms of potentially getting into the event, right? Because it's an automatic qualifier. So that's what I think, is that this is like their end around to get more money because they can't get it just by expanding the playoff.
Here's what I hate about this. If you're going to have a committee, let the committee do the work. And maybe the end around here should be that the Big Ten and the SEC create the criteria by which these teams are judged and place an emphasis on, teams will be rewarded for playing other ranked teams or other high quality opponents. And here's what a quality opponent is in the eyes of the committee. Yeah. But if you're going to have a committee, let the committee work, trust the committee, lean into the process and open it for everyone. So Boise State, for example, or Arizona State, for example, can also decide, hey, we want to schedule quality non-conference games and don't want to be penalized for it. If you're going to create the system or create that avenue for yourself, leave it open for everybody else in college football. Because right now, here's the thing that I'm not sure Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti fully grasp. I think they are aware that they're being vilified a little bit and being called bullies for what they're doing. I've heard a lot of noise this week about what they're trying to do, but I'm not sure they fully grasp how turned off people are outside of their footprints. And I know their footprints have grown, but the noise outside of those footprints is deafening right now. And people are all looking over at them. We all know what they're up to. You said money. I think everybody's saying money. And you're probably not wrong on their logic, but at least, come with clean hands to this and just say, look, here's what our concern is. We want to play these games. We're being incentivized by the TV media partners to play these quality matchups. Hey, look, we want to create the criteria by which we're judged. We want to give instruction to the committee that says, hey, don't downgrade Penn State and LSU for playing this game. But that should also stand for Boise State when it schedules Oregon, and Oregon when it schedules Boise State in a non-conference game.
Very fair. Totally agree. The problem with the committee is the criteria is uncertain, right? Strength of schedule is supposed to be number one, I believe, and yet clearly it wasn't in some of their decisions. The other piece to it is the weekly rankings box the committee in, especially the Tuesday before championship weekend.
Yes.
Right? It undermines trust in the whole process. You get the committee chair; he's got to answer those questions on ESPN every week, and he ends up talking in circles and being hypocritical. But ESPN wants that programming, and the only way they can get rid of the weekly ranking show is if they agree to take less money from ESPN. And there's no chance of that ever happening. So they're stuck with the committee and with the weekly shows. And their only avenue to get more money right now is to create this in-season scheduling show. It's just a big cluster.
If I could do away with two things immediately, I would do away with the preseason top 25 because it frames everything that happens in the early part of the season in an unfair way to everybody. It's not accurate. It's not real. Look at the preseason top 25 every season. It's wrong. And yet what happens? The early part of those rankings, the early part of the CFP rankings are based on people's expectations from the summer, like it or not. I'd get rid of that, and I would get rid of the weekly show. I think it's bad. I think it's a terrible thing. I think it's divisive. I think it's hurtful to the process.
It is.
Basketball, they're giving you an early peek in basketball, but that selection committee doesn't have to come out with weekly rankings every Tuesday and justify the rankings. And like you said, I was great. I think it's a great metaphor. They're just boxed into a corner because they are justifying the rankings on a weekly basis. And then, they're not able to kind of just freely pick who they think the best 12 teams are and rank them.
Exactly. But they won't give money back. They won't take less from ESPN. And that's what would happen because ESPN, those, 5 shows on Tuesdays, that's good ratings for ESPN. And so, again, college sports all about the dollars, and they're not going to give money back. So,
Wilner, let's talk about the playoff because they're going to come out next week. They're going to meet as a group. What do you expect? I mean, what kind of changes? I think, obviously Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, sounds like they want to maybe have some seating changes or at least talk about seating changes, but it will need to be a unanimous vote for 2025.
Right.
Do you think they can get everybody to agree that, hey, we shouldn't give the top 4 seeds to the conference champions?
Right. What the Big Ten and the SEC want is basically the seeds follow the rankings. So even if you don't win your conference, you could still be a top 4 seed and get a bye. I think it's going to be tough. They got a shot. If I were putting a point spread on it, probably even. They might be able to convince the Big 10, Big 12 and ACC and the group of 5 to go along with it. They may have to give on something else. I don't know. They got a shot. I certainly don't think it's going to be easy, though. I agree that what I think they should do it. To me, you know how like the NBA has got the Bird exception or the Larry Bird rule, and then other sports have got these pieces of their collective bargaining agreements that are named after players or situations. To me, this would be the Oregon rule, right? Because Oregon was the big loser from the way they did it because they had to play Ohio State in the quarters. And if the thing had been the straight seed, Oregon never would have had it. The Big Ten champ.
Oregon would have played Indiana. Oregon would have had Indiana if you just seeded it straight.
And so that to me just made it glaring that they had to change this whole thing, right? But we'll see. I don't know if they can do it.
I'll go back to the poker game that's being played. Like, if I'm the Big 12 and I'm the ACC and I'm the group of 5, I'm listening to this proposal. But I'm going to ask the Big 10 and the SEC for something in return in 2026 and beyond. So if you tell me, hey, we'll do away with the top 4 highest ranked conference champions being, the first round buys, all of that. If you tell me that I need to vote in favor of that and just seat it straight, I'll do that if you will give up on your automatic qualifier dream and just trust the committee. And I think there's going to be some back and forth here. And I kind of wondered, Wilner, if they floated that out there as a negotiating chip. These are smart guys. They're playing poker. I kind of wondered, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, did they float out the idea that they were interested in talking about giving up the seating and just straight giving up the way it was seated and talk about just seating it straight? Did they get that out there because they want to be able to negotiate that point and maybe talk about some other things. I don't know.
Could be. The AQ situation would be, for 5-6 years, presumably. Whereas if they have to kind of grin and bear it with the seeding, that's only one more season. It would only be next season that they'd have to put up with the current situation, and then everything will change. There is a look-in provision in the contract. I think it's in 27 or 28 where things could change again, but I don't know. And it's interesting. I think ESPN reported that the group of 5 commissioners are supposed to be meeting this weekend to just kind of get their ducks in order for the playoff, make sure they're all on the same page. The Big 12 and the ACC have had discussions. Everybody, you could see everybody kind of getting aligned with their peer groups. And right now, the SEC and the Big 10 are on that top tier.
It comes back to something we've talked about a lot. I mean, college football needs a czar. It needs a commissioner. It needs somebody who's going, hey, the greater good, where does the greater good fit in here? And I look, we both talked to Tony Petitti at Big Ten Media Day, and he talked with me about his father. His father was a New York City cop. He's got this real sense of justness and morality and what is right. And I'm hoping that Tony Petitti leans into that. And Greg Sankey, he came up on campuses. He's a college guy. He was in collegiate athletics his whole life. He has to remember what this is supposed to be about. Yes, you need to do within reason what's right for your conference, but you shouldn't be trying to run away with it all. You're killing the golden goose.
You are. There's no doubt about it. We'll see. Self-interest dominates, right?
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know. I'm not encouraged. I think it's going to end up going down the wrong road. But yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, but how damaging is that in your mind to college athletics? I mean, are we talking about a pivot point in college athletics or college football in general, where we look back on this and say this is where it went wrong?
Well, if they do the AQs, it changes the dynamic of the whole regular season. It has been the best regular season in sports forever. And if you know that the SEC sending 4 teams and the Big Ten sending 4 teams, it will affect, I think, the interest in the regular season, the competitive landscape of the regular season. Right? They're talking about having, for instance, in the Big Ten, you get to the championship weekend, and all of a sudden, the first 2 teams are in the playoff, and then 3 plays 6 and 4 plays 5 for the last 2 automatic qualifier spots. I mean, do people want to see the 5th place team, 6th place team in the Big Ten? Yeah, I don't know that they do. And the thing is, the other piece to this, and we could do an entire show about this, is if you're adding games, where are they going? They already are bumping up against the NFL in those opening round games. And if they add more games that weekend, all it's going to do is create more acrimony with the NFL. And that is not a fight college football needs to pick.
Yeah, people are reading that ESPN must not be happy with the college football playoff and how that went. And I see maybe that's true. But I think your point earlier about ESPN really wanting some crossover games featuring the best brands of the SEC playing more meaningful, high-profile regular season games is probably what this is more about. And
it is,
getting those big games earlier in the year.
I've reached out to a couple people in the last 48 hours. There's no evidence that ESPN wants the extra CFP games, or that ESPN even wants the automatic qualifiers and this championship weekend. Like, I mean, the SEC championship game does 17 million, 18 million. If the SEC, instead of that one game kind of winner take all thing, has got 4 or 5 games on championship weekend, I'm not sure that that's more valuable to ESPN.
Watered down. It's watered down.
So it'll be interesting how ESPN's role in this whole thing is something that we should be watching next week and after that.
Meanwhile, pivoting here to my couple of days in Boise State, I spent some time at Boise State on their campus, kind of getting to know that city, getting to know what it's about, talking to people, talking to coaches, talking to athletes, talking to Jeremiah Dickey, who we've had on the show, the athletic director. And
Yep.
I got to say this about Boise, Wilner. People in Boise are excited about being in the Pac-12. The downtown is clean. The air is clean. People will tell you, go to Boise, you can ski and you can swim and you can hike and you can bike ride all in the same day. You can go to 8th Street and walk, and you can find endless brew pubs and craft breweries. And there's a lot of cool things about Boise State. But, man, it was just the big picture I got was how enthusiastic they are. They're investing in football. They are the professional sports team in town. In some ways, it's like Lincoln, Nebraska. It's like Tallahassee, Florida. It's like Tuscaloosa, except the stadium's only 35,000, right? Instead of 70 or 80 or whatever. So just a lot of enthusiasm for what they're doing. Not afraid to take risks. Liked a lot of what I heard. But Boise State and beyond in this conference, this New World Pac-12, I think it was just an interesting couple of days. I was fascinated by it.
I've always thought Boise State football and Gonzaga basketball have some similarities. I mean, Spokane, I don't know where they are in population, but they are similar mid-level, high quality of life, growing towns where all the energy and all the corporate dollars, everything is focused on the one team, right? Boise football and Gonzaga basketball, and that has helped both of them, become, and their trajectories very much mirror each other. Gonzaga got started 5-6 years earlier than Boise in the ascension process, but there's so many similarities.
Yeah, I mean, there's such buy-in, and you're right about there's no competition from the NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, NFL, and you benefit from that in a number of ways. Like the nearest NBA team, the Trailblazers in Portland, claim the territorial broadcast rights in Boise. I mean, that's how far-reaching it is. You have to get on a plane and fly more than an hour to find an NBA team, and so if you're Boise State, you're not getting your sponsorship dollars, your corporate dollars, your NIL dollars. It's not being cannibalized. Your season ticket base not being cannibalized by these other entities that are competing against you. You've got everyone's attention, and it manifests itself not just with dollars, and it manifests itself with enthusiasm and energy. I talked to Carl Benson, former WAC commissioner. I said, hey, back in the day, let's go back to like 2004. Let's go back to when Friday night football games started getting played in the WAC. And ESPN approaches the WAC and says, hey, nobody else will do these games. It's in our contract with other conferences. We can't do this on a Friday night. Do you have some teams that'll play on Friday night? And Boise State's like, we'll do it. And not only that, the community, the high school football coaches and the athletic director at Boise State get together and they say, hey, look, we'll move our games to Thursdays and Saturdays when you play on a Friday. Guess what? You can hold your high school game inside a Bronco Stadium on Saturdays. We're going to let you use it. Everybody got on board. Everybody got behind it, and nobody felt bad about it. And so you still had a full stadium on Friday nights, no competition from high school sports, $100,000 bonus going to Boise State every time it played on ESPN for multiple seasons on Friday nights. And they built a brand, much like Gonzaga. It's a great point because football, basketball, those two things walked hand in hand.
And Mark Few, Chris Peterson, similarities there too. Do you think Boise is going to dominate the rebuilt Pac-12?
I kept thinking about, the investment Boise looks like it's willing to make. There's $65 million north end zone renovation.
Yep.
It's going to be phenomenal. They've got multiple levels of suites. Team's going to leave the locker room. It's going to walk through all these high-level donors to get to the field. It's just really smart stuff. You've seen it done in other places. I think American Airlines Arena with the Dallas Mavericks did the same thing. Mark Cuban did the same thing very early. His team walks through this area where your courtside seat ticket holders are hanging out, having drinks, club level people. Here comes the team walking through the area. It's just really smart. A lot of people have done it, but Boise's doing it. I think Boise will be at the top of that conference. I think Oregon State wants to spend at the top of that conference, but I want to see it. Washington State, I don't think is going to spend at the level that they need to spend. I think this is going to be an eye-opener if they don't get near the top of that conference in spending. But I'm looking at like the market of San Diego State and the access that San Diego State has to Southern California and their budget. I'm looking at Boise State. I'm looking at Oregon State. And I want to know who else wants to belong at the top of that conference, because I think if it started today, that would be those three schools I would say would be fighting at the top of the conference. And maybe Washington State watches this and goes, hey, we need to spend, but I haven't seen that alignment that we talk about.
Right.
Regents to president to athletic department. Not yet. Not now.
Well, and who won the Big 12? Arizona State. SMU wins the ACC. Oregon wins the Big 10. I mean, all the schools, Texas finished second in the SEC, right? There are a lot of cases where the new schools are ready to roll, and the Cougars and Beavers certainly had better be ready. I do get the same vibe you do, that Oregon State is more committed than Washington State. I don't have a great feel for, Utah State, Colorado State yet. But it seems to me like if you mapped out 5 years worth of rebuilt Pac-12 championships, who's playing in that game? There's 10 slots in that game. I'm guessing, Boise's in probably playing 4 or 5 times, right? They're in it almost every time. And who else is going to fill it out?
I would agree. I think there's a big question, and maybe the answer is who else are they adding, right? Yeah, because there's still a question here in the next month or so. I think we're going to figure out what are they doing from a media rights standpoint, what are they doing from an expansion standpoint. But Boise State is not afraid to take a risk. I think they have the enthusiasm of that community. I think they want to matter. I think it might just line up, Wilner. Like, we look at the budgets of the Big Ten and the SEC schools. I think we'll be looking at the budgets in the athletic departments in the New World Pac-12, and it might just be who's spending, who's in the top 3 or 4, because Boise State's got it together. And if you're right, if Oregon State and Washington State are not ready, Boise State will be there waiting in that conference championship game every year.
And you made a great point in one of your columns, which was really, really good. Everybody should read them, about Boise's enrollment situation, right? And their out-of-state enrollments going up. Yes. And that's a huge deal because you can charge full cost, right? Tuition. And what's the best marketing agent for that university? It's the football team.
Yes.
So any investment that the university is making in football is basically an investment in branding the school.
Yeah.
And we've seen time and time again how that has worked for other places. So we'll see if the new Pac-12 has other universities that are willing to make that commitment.
Yeah, at Boise State, their out-of-state enrollment was up 66% in the last.
A lot of dollars there.
Yeah, a lot of dollars there, and they're at 27,250 students. I mean, they're going to push to 30,000 students. They're growing.
Yep.
Season ticket wait list that has 250 names on it. They have different problems than some of the other schools.
Well, Washington State's enrollment's cratered in the last 4 or 5 years, right? Those are two schools are going opposite ways.
And I talked to couple of the regents at Washington State, and I asked that question, like, you have an enrollment crisis, you have like a budget issue in athletics and success of football. Do you understand the correlation with enrollment? And the answer came that there's a difficult time separating those two things. People have they need more people to say, I want to go to Washington State. And they know athletics plays a role in that. They know football plays a role in that. So let's see what they do. I'm optimistic that their new hire, the new president they're bringing in comes from Utah State, seems to understand the value of that brand. But let's see the alignment, because you need to have that alignment where everybody's rowing in the same direction, or you can't get there.
Yep. What's next on your tour?
Probably going to Gonzaga, Spokane. I mean, I think Boise State and Gonzaga, you hit it. I mean, they're 1-2, 2-1. Whoever, from a basketball football standpoint, probably not 2 more validating moves by Teresa Gold's new conference. Bring those 2 schools into the fold. Big things. But I am excited. I'm excited to go to Fort Collins and to Logan, Utah, and go see a basketball game at Utah State. Everybody's telling me, go to San Diego State, go to Utah State, see basketball games in those places. And, there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Pac-12 fan, I think. On that note, make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube podcast that we do, video cast that we do, and give us a subscribe and make sure that you share it with friends and family. Read him, Jon Wilner, at wilnerhotline.com. Read me at joncanzano.com. And we're back next week. We'll be talking probably about the newest development with the college football playoff and beyond. And we have some big guests coming down the pipeline.
Thanks very much, everybody.